Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. I am so excited to, first of all, be going into the weekend. I can't lie. Even though it was a short week, I'm still glad that it's Friday. Now, where are you, Suzanne? Where are you located? I'm in Atlanta.
I'm in Port St. Lucie, Florida. So we're sort of in the, yeah.
Oh, I don't know Port St. Lucie. I don't know where. Give me a landmark.
Hmm. I can give, the landmark I can give you, I'm above West Palm,
Okay.
about an hour on
Okay.
that. So it's the East Coast
Okay.
and kind of halfway up.
Nice, nice, nice. I would love to know where our viewers are watching from. So please put that in the chat. I want to give everybody space to come on in. I want to let you all know that even though we are talking about loss and the emotional aspect, that it's a heavy topic and we understand that, but we're gonna give you some tips and strategies to walk away with. We want to make sure that everybody comes in. If you have a question, if you have a comment, if you have something that you'd like to add or share, absolutely, this is an open conversation, open dialogue, so we welcome your comments and your questions. And so I just want to kind of start off with, tell us who you are, how you got into this work, and a little background.
Thank you. So my name is Suzanne White, and I'm the founder of Caregiver Warrior, which is a blog and a website. I've written a book, and I'm doing webinars for working caregivers and companies, and
Hmm.
I'm a keynote speaker. In the caregiving world, because I was lucky enough to be asked to take care of my parents.
Hmm.
And I had to come to terms with the fact that it was something I really, really wanted to do. Yet it was difficult for me because I didn't really get along with my mom really well. And my dad sort of had enabled her all of our lives. So there was a little bit of baggage there, in addition to the intense journey we go on as caregivers. It's a very, very intense, very emotional, demanding commitment.
Hmm.
And I made a lot of mistakes. So, and I had to really sort of look at me and my life and my behavior to cope and to make sure I didn't hit the wall of caregiver burnout. And I realized as I talked to more caregivers that everybody would say to me, they don't tell you about this. So I figured, I would take notes and kind of journal and maybe help other people survive their journey, their caregiving journey, with grace and empowerment through my experience and my mistakes.
Hmm. Hmm. Many of the people watching are maybe in relationships, and it is emotionally taxing on them, or they might be co-parenting with ex partners who have narcissistic tendencies, and they are feeling some of the same burnout maybe that you felt. Give me a little bit of background on you and your mom's relationship. And I know your heart posture was in, I want to do this, I want to be there for her, I want to be there for my parents. Why was that difficult?
Well, it was difficult because even through therapy and self work and self awareness, I would get triggered by my mom because I would have to be caring for her, and she was not happy about it. And I now know that my mom probably had a lot of undiagnosed anxiety,
Mhm.
which made her very difficult to be around. And as a child, I didn't understand that. As a child,
Mhm.
I just knew that someone was yelling at me all the time, and criticizing me and being very difficult with me and very hard on me. So I became a perfectionist that got very triggered. So it was difficult in that my mom didn't want my help, and it really threw her. She was very proud, and I had to really cope with the fact that I felt like 6 years old in her presence.
Mm.
I was
Mhm.
back to that trauma, and wasn't my best self. We
Mhm.
had dance. We ended up doing a dance for decades with each
Mhm.
other. And
Mhm.
that was painful, and it wasn't conducive.
Yeah. Yeah. When you're constantly caring for someone emotionally, it's very easy to lose yourself. How did you tell me a little bit more about the dance?
The dance. Well, we fought for, as I said, decades for the last word. So it it wouldn't even matter what the topic was. It was just her inability to feel comfortable around me. I was
Mhm.
thinking recently that there was a certain me that she felt safe around,
Mhm.
and I
Mhm.
couldn't really be that me all the time. Do you know what I mean?
What
It was
made it hard?
well,
What
she had very strict definitions of, sort of the quiet, proper child that was very well behaved, didn't have any kind of big emotions, sort of quiet and standing by her and giving her a lot of attention and love all the time, and that's not possible for anyone to do, no matter what
Mhm.
age.
Mhm.
But as a child, it's difficult to have that responsibility. And I was very creative and kind of an intense kid. I was a very overly sensitive child, I believe.
Mhm.
And that was kind of difficult for her because I would have reactions to things that she just wasn't prepared to handle.
Mhm.
Does that make
Mhm.
sense?
It makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. You could not be authentically who you were because she had a expectation for you. And even though an adult, you know, your own bills, your own issues, your own problems, she still saw you through her lens. What
Yeah.
about when the roles reversed, right? Like,
Yes. And that's an intense journey when you're in a healthy relationship,
mhm,
when any kind of role reverses, when even when a spouse gets suddenly sick, or and then the other spouse, who's usually the one that's been taken care of, has to take care of the other one. It's a very intense relationship. So with just in general for caregivers, when the child becomes the adult and the adult becomes a child, it's hard.
mhm, mhm,
So for my mother, we both had a difficult time. Neither of us wanted to accept our roles. She didn't want to accept help from me and for me to take care of her life
mhm,
or to be the adult. And I kind of didn't. I didn't want it. I wanted. I would like. I would have. I've always wanted a mother,
mhm,
that I could count on, and I didn't always have that. So the fact that
mhm,
that was going to be gone forever, talk about a
mhm.
sense of loss. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
that was an that was it. That was a lot of big emotions attached to that. Very
yeah.
scary. Very scary.
What about resentment?
Oh,
Was there okay, give me the time span. From what time, date, year did you take on this role, this responsibility
let's.
to like what was the span?
Well, it was. It was back in the mid 20s, and like it was like around 2016. No, it was a little bit earlier than that, but I'm not quite sure about the dates because I
Okay,
sort
yeah,
of like
yeah, just
blank the
year.
whole dates.
So
But the
we
bottom
just
line,
trying to get a sense
yeah,
of like how long.
I was an adult in my late middle age
Mhm.
when she developed early stages of Alzheimer's, and my dad had heart issues, and they were hiding it from us. So it took a while for us to find out because they were working really well together as a beautiful team. So I was an adult and had worked on my relationship with her, but when it became really obvious that she was losing her memory and her ability to function in her life, I had to step in and do everything from the checkbook
Mhm.
to her doctor's appointments
Mhm.
to caring for her health.
Mhm.
So it was it escalated kind of quickly. So I was well on my way to retirement in my own life,
Mhm.
and having to take on this responsibility, while it wasn't a shock because they were getting older, it was still a shock when I stepped into it,
Yeah.
because it was obvious to me she wasn't going to change. I had to. And I thought I was doing like all this self work, you know,
Mhm.
but confronted with my mother screaming at me, go back to, I was living in New York at the time, go back to New York. I don't want your help. And really, really being mean and aggressive about it. Um, the resentment was just like, I, I'm losing my life. My life
Mhm.
has changed. I have a
Mhm.
big loss because my life is no longer the same,
Mhm.
right? I'm not
Mhm.
living my life doing what I want. I'm living their life doing what they want. So there's big loss there. I was thinking, and she's giving me a hard time about it.
I mean, how many people watching can honestly say that you could put yourself in Suzanne's shoes? Like, this person who I have already had a tumultuous relationship with, I am willing to pause my life to help. And while I'm helping both parents, while I'm helping, I am getting so much pushback, triggered from probably things that she had no idea from
Mhm,
before that you were already still hurt over. And
mhm.
then new things on top of that, like the layers, the layers, the layers, the layers. Being an emotional caregiver in a relationship leads to burnout. I mean, you absolutely cannot pour from an empty cup.
No.
How did you begin to find balance, you know, in your own life?
Yes. And there's no quick fix on this, and it wasn't pretty, but slowly but surely I began to do things or understand I had to be self-aware.
Mhm.
I mean,
Mhm.
I was miserable, and talk about burnout. I always say that because I think just in relationships that are tumultuous or just in life, burnout's very I think a lot of us are going to face burnout. So for me, it was, am I going to hit that burnout wall at 150 miles an hour or like 5 miles an hour? So to
Mhm.
get down to 5 miles an hour, I just realized that I've been trying to change my relationship with my mom forever, for
Mhm.
decades, and she wasn't going to change. And
Mhm.
she absolutely was not going to change now,
No.
especially now. I mean,
Yeah.
she was diagnosed and she was going to get worse, obviously, but she wasn't going to change. I had to change. And I was miserable. I was so resentful and miserable and exhausted. And I said, I can't do this. Something has to change. So, invention is what's necessary. You invent. So I realized the only thing I could change was me. The only thing that
Mhm.
I could control was me. So I
Mhm.
started to really look at my behavior and what was triggering me and how I could start to avoid just having that reactive trigger, that I had to find empathy and patience somehow.
Mhm.
And just very slowly but surely, I had to try to figure out what I was thinking and what was happening for me and be really aware of my body.
Mhm.
Was my shoulders, and my stomach, like it happens in my stomach for me. And I
Mhm.
would have to I said, you have to take your emotional temperature. Like, what are you feeling?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
in getting more in touch with what I was feeling, it took a long time, but I was able to say, wow, why am I so angry right now?
Yeah.
Or why am I so scared right now?
Mhm.
And instead of stuffing those feelings, which we do, especially when we're in a relationship where we have to care for somebody or we feel the need to care for somebody, um, we can't stuff them. We have to be aware of them and we have to sit with them, which is
Mhm.
really difficult, and there's no great way to do it, a perfect way to do it. But I had to at least acknowledge it.
You brought up a point that I speak about often, which is kind of reactive, right? And many times, if you're in a relationship with someone who pushes your buttons, they know what buttons to push, then you react. And then everyone focuses on the reaction and they forget about what caused it, right? And so another important thing that you talked about when it gets to when you are trying to control your reaction is checking with your feelings and your emotions and stopping and saying, you know what, only I have the power to
Mhm.
control how I react. Taking time to say, all right, let me label it. Is it
Mhm.
fear? Is it anxiety? Is it fear? Like, what about when you're in the moment? Like, that sounds so I mean,
Yes.
I mean, coming from a therapist, you're in the world of helping. We can easily sit here and say, you know what, label the feelings, label the emotions, stop, think, breathe, process, come back with an I statement. You can only control yourself. You can't control others. I mean, it sounds so good in theory,
Yeah, yeah,
but what about like in the moments where you're tired,
yeah,
she's yelling, your dad's calling you from the kitchen, like the
yeah.
moment where you feel like you're being taken for granted and there's no thank you,
Right.
and then you get the comment like like show us in practical terms.
In practical terms, I see if this makes sense. In practical terms, 8 times out of 10, I would get right into the pudding, right? I would be right in there,
Mhm.
8 times out of 10. So the secret for me became giving myself some grace
Mhm.
after those 8 times and trying to calm myself down afterwards to, taking a walk and then thinking about it.
Mhm.
Like I think the biggest gift for me was my self-awareness after we had a fight. Do you know what I mean? In other words, I was able to start to look and say, wow, what happened just then?
Mhm.
What's going on with me?
Mhm.
Why was I so, and there was a lot of gifts for me because there would be situations where, I would be trying to, she almost bit me one time because God bless her. See, and I can say that now because I've been healed. God bless her. She was really scared and frightened, and I was exhausted, and she was really angry, and I was scared that she was going to hurt herself by falling. And I went to get her and just set her off.
Mhm.
I got so upset. I got so angry.
Mhm.
I was able to walk away, like once she was settled and everything, but it really freaked me out. And
Mhm.
I took the time to give myself grace and say, all right, let's hit rewind. And what was going on for you? And what can you change the next time? And the next time was like I had been angry for 4 days.
Mhm.
I was
Mhm.
walking around and I wasn't in touch with it.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so the red flag went up, and I said, I'm gonna have to really watch. And again, there's no quick fix, but little by little, I said, I'm going to have to understand or see what
Mhm.
I'm feeling,
Mhm.
so that I'm not walking around like a powder keg. So
Yeah.
that when something does happen and she does trigger me, and she knew exactly where my buttons were, I have to make my buttons smaller.
Oh, interesting. Interesting. That goes back to when I tell people all of the time that, boundaries is not controlling the other person. Boundaries is more for you. And I know emotional caregiving feels like love, but without boundaries, it becomes a trap. So when you just said, like, I had to make my buttons smaller, that sounds a lot like boundaries.
Mhm. That was my responsibility. She was going to go for my buttons. I couldn't stop that, but it's my job to make my buttons smaller.
Mhm. Mhm.
And it's codependent. I mean, I had a lot of codependency with her. Do you know what I mean? Like to please her and to be perfect and to make sure she was okay. I mean, that was, if you're hysterical, it's historical. There was a
Mhm.
lot of stuff there. So
Mhm.
I had to, it was in the moments after the 2 times that I was probably able to calmly walk away were rare. So
Mhm.
I had to slowly but surely give myself grace and start to understand, walk away or try to be better or get rid of that one button so that she wouldn't escalate to the point that I was already off and running.
Mhm. Mhm.
We had a thing like all my childhood where if I wouldn't respond, if she couldn't get her hook in me, she would bait me. And I would bait her too. I mean, I would go, listen, I have to really be honest about something. I went to that relationship um expecting to fight with her,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
You know,
Okay.
so
Well, I mean, at least you knew, like, you weren't going into, you set your expectations. You knew that it was going to be difficult based on the history, the past that you had already
Right.
experienced with your mom, right?
Right. And the thing that's interesting about dementia, Alzheimer's patients, for me anyway, was I found out, I was really blessed. I found out that softer tones, like calmer tones, would make her calm.
Mhm.
So symbolically for me, like I had to say, you think she's going to fight with you all the time. Like you go in expecting a battle.
Mhm.
Suppose there's no battle today,
Mhm. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? And the more I try that and practice that, the more I would go in softer.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
No, you got used to, I mean, we talk about fight, flight, freeze, fawn. I learned last week is a new one. Fawn, for you all, I'm sure everybody has heard of fight, flight, freeze, but fawn is when you try to overcompensate in a relationship. But it sounds like you had been so used to fight, on defense, on guard, ready,
Yes.
that that is how you approached most situations with your mom.
Yes.
And then once you realize, like, I'm going to take the boxing gloves off, like,
Yes.
not every interaction is going to be a fight. So you changed your mindset,
Yes.
and that changed the interactions.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And we're so used to it. For me anyway, I was so used to it. That was how I operated. I expected my relationship with her to be absolutely tumultuous. It was bad. We're going to fight. We didn't get along. And I think the blessing for me was in seeing her slip away from me and become less of the strong, domineering, proud person. I think, whatever you want to believe in, higher power or God or whatever, gave me the gift of seeing her kind of slip away.
Mhm.
And it gave me an opportunity to say, oh, wow, maybe there's a different story here. Or, you know, maybe I can look at this differently. And she doesn't have the capacity to fight with me anymore, you know?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I think that, getting out of that normal attitude that I had, I never questioned that attitude.
Mhm.
And in knowing that I had to change, I was like, well, what if? What if it was going to be an okay day today?
Mhm.
What if maybe I could just be kinder or softer, or maybe assume that we could have a laugh together?
Mhm. Mhm.
And, as again, slowly but surely, that happened.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that you're blessed that you found silver linings in a difficult situation. We have people watching who are like, that's not my story,
Right.
like, I've tried and there is no silver lining. And someone said it's so difficult to control your reactions when you're so drained. Yeah, I agree.
Mhm.
I agree. What about when loss hit? Um, and I want to define loss so that it is an operational definition for you and for my audience. A big case G grief is someone dies, there's a fire, it's, you cannot get that person or that thing back, right? I always consider that uppercase G grief, right?
Mhm.
Lowercase G grief is when you had a expectation or a relationship or a job that did not pan out the way that you thought that it would. You still
Mhm.
experience grief, right? And I
Mhm.
don't want to minimize that.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
when we're talking about loss for the purposes of this conversation, we're talking about all of it.
Mhm.
Tell me about the loss and how you were able to care for yourself
Mhm.
during.
So, interestingly enough, there's another loss in my life. So, I was diagnosed. My balance was off, and to make a very long story short, I had brain surgery a year and a half ago, and it was benign, and it was a great operation, and Thank God it worked out really well. But I had an MRI on Saturday, and I was talking to the doctor, the surgeon, on Monday with a
Mm,
diagnosis of a brain tumor.
mm,
So it's been really interesting. And I said to myself, well, watch yourself, because now you're going to be somebody else is caring for. So you can be the guinea pig. In addition to that, I have retired and then I moved. So loss for me of my life and the way I thought it was going to be was probably a capital G
yeah.
at that time. However, the mini losses, I've had a lot of like little mini losses, because I'm doing great and I'm very blessed to be here. But it's been a year and a half of me trying to get back to an old normal,
Mhm,
because I'm doing really well, but I'm not still myself from the
mhm,
brain operation. So I have this grief and this sense of loss. And it's kind of very quiet because I'm doing really well.
mhm,
And I feel guilty that I don't feel fabulous.
mhm,
So I
mhm,
have to be really careful around it and to
mhm.
give myself a lot of grace. And the one thing I've learned is, grief and loss and healing doesn't have a time limit,
Mhm,
that
mhm.
I have to really be kind to myself and not feel guilty that things just aren't the same anymore. And I feel really bad about it.
Yeah, yeah. So you have taken all of your experience, your knowledge, and you've written a book,
Yes.
and you have platforms where you share and teach about all of this. How did that come about? And what are some nuggets that people have has really helped people over the years?
Well, the thing that really helped me was I was journaling during my caregiving journey with my
Mhm,
parents, and just in my life. I used to be a singer-songwriter, so I used to write lyrics. So I just started journaling. And then I started writing. I started writing blogs, just really down to earth, honest. Hey, I feel like I don't know what I'm doing. I feel really awful. And here's kind of what happened to me at 4 o'clock in the morning and got me through the night. Those
mhm,
kind of articles. And people started to relate to that. So that started me off writing and blogging on a weekly basis and in social media. And actually, Simon and Schuster came to me because they saw my Instagram post, or they liked the way I wrote on my Instagram posts, and they said, "Would you do a book for us about caregiving tips and how you can help caregivers can help themselves and take care of themselves?" So I wrote this wonderful book called Self Care for Caregivers, and it's 140 tips and strategies that I came up with. And I probably use 130 of them sometimes before I get to the 131 that helps me
mhm.
of how to just little things that we can do for ourselves that helps us understand we need to prioritize ourselves
Yeah,
and not to beat ourselves up about it.
yeah, yeah. And I want you to know that the information that she shares in her book is not just for people who are caring for seniors, right? Like,
Right.
this is applicable to, you might be caring for someone. There might be some codependency that you recognize in your
Mhm.
relationships. There might be some boundaries that you need to set to
Yeah.
help you care for yourself. And so I believe the information that you have to share can really reach a
Mhm.
uh wider. How can people find you? Tell them where they could reach you at, because I really do believe that there is healing in both your testimony
Mhm.
and in your, I would not have had you on this platform if I did not believe that. I believe that there's healing in testimony. I also
Mhm.
believe that the information that you're sharing could definitely benefit my audience. So where can they find you?
Thank you so much. That makes me feel so great. Caregiverwarrior.com.
Mhm, mhm.
And that's the best place to go. And you can get in touch with me. I'm on social media at Caregiver Warrior, but caregiverwarrior.com. That's my blog. And you can see my book, and you can reach out to me and give me feedback and tell me how you're doing
Yeah.
and hear my story.
Thank you so, so very much. I really, really, truly appreciate it. This topic is very near and dear to my heart, both because I have a father who is suffering from dementia, and there's definitely an emotional weight, that it could be invisible to others, but it's real life. In real life, it can cause a toll on you. And so I really, really thank you, those of you who are listening. I hope that there was something that was said today that resonates with you. And share this message, right? Share this message to someone that you think could benefit from it. If you have a testimony that you would like to share, or if you're a helper or a caregiver in any area and you would like to be featured on this podcast, I would love to have you. We air every Friday at noon. And so feel free to reach out to me. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much for gracing us with your time and sharing your experience with us. And everyone have a great weekend. Thank you so much. How'd it go?
Oh, I loved it.
It was so good. It was so good.
Oh.
Like we